Hello, everyone. This part of this conference will be in English. I'm gonna give a very short introduction to Pooyan Tamimi Arab, and then I will have a discussion with him. Hopefully, a peaceful discussion. He's an assistant professor of religious studies. Correct me if I was wrong, Puyan. He's an assistant
Absolutely
professor
correct.
of religious studies at Utrecht University, coordinator of research master programs and stuff. I think you're still doing that. Am I right? Okay. He studied history and philosophy, University of Amsterdam, New School. Earned a PhD in cultural anthropology at Utrecht, interdisciplinary approach. He blends anthropology, political philosophy, art history, sociology to explore secular religious interfaces. Did I do a good job?
Thank you. It's great. I'm all over the place, I
Oh,
would
thank
say.
you. Hi, Puyan. Thank you
Salam.
very much for joining. And I know you're someone who doesn't waste words, so I'll try to keep this sharp but not too dry. And as someone whose work critically explores how knowledge is shaped, instrumentalized, and sometimes weaponized, so I really love to hear your thoughts on the Peace, Democracy, and Media Conference that we tried to put together in collaboration with Leiden University and as a part of a bigger festival that was called Just Peace Festival all around The Hague before the NATO summit. So I really got happy that to see you there. I think there were like lots of voices heard in the conference, and um, what struck you most would be my interest, positively, critically, or in between. And also curious to hear your take on how conferences like this deal or fail to deal with competing narratives, plural perspectives, that kind of inclusivity in the discourse that you are looking for, and yeah, or lack thereof. I don't know. Maybe there's a lack of that. Feel free to be blunt, as we discussed over the WhatsApp, and I would like to know your feedback and yeah, but I hope it's spicy enough to spark a debate, not here maybe, but somewhere else. So yeah, having said that, I'm all ears to hear your thoughts on the conference and how it was for you.
Thank you. Is my voice coming across properly? Yeah, you are muted, I think. Yeah, good. Okay. So I'd like to first thank you, Sajad and Iran Academia, for organizing this timely conference. It is wonderful that scholars, journalists, and activists have a place in The Hague to be connected, educated, and to publish research motivated by the urgency of democratization in Iran. So, you asked me this morning actually whether I was willing to provide feedback and especially critical feedback. So, I'm sorry, that's how I understood it to what we have heard. So, the following may be a bit unpleasant, but I want to stress that I really appreciate the work and the passion. So, to begin, the conference's focus on media is crucial. We live in an era of unprecedented technological, economic, cultural, and political complexity. In his recent reflections on the structural transformations of the public sphere in the new digital era, Habermas notes that this increased complexity appears to overwhelm societies, many of which turn to populist ideologies. On the other hand, this complexity also presents opportunities to energize public spheres. The Iranian transnational public political debating culture is marked by both populism, often backward looking, to imagined past greatness and community, as one conference speaker also explained in reference to Benedict Anderson's work on nationalism, but also opportunities for enlightenment, offensively advocating for human rights and a democracy that would fight for women's rights and also the rights of individuals and groups persecuted on other grounds, such as class, ethnicity, religion, and more. The emergence of satellite television and radio channels, and now also various social media channels, has broken the Islamic Republic's attempts to monopolize media, and this conference is actually an example of that. Voice of America Persian since 94, Radio Farda since 2002, BBC Persian Television since 2009, followed by Manoto TV since 2010 until recently, and Iran International since 2017, as well as television channels targeting ethnic and religious minorities, form a media landscape that highlights diverse perspectives. The disrupting and energizing social and political impact of these media lies in the fact that they generate competing public opinions. The diversity of media creates the conditions under which millions of people, Iranians, acquire a sense that they can choose from different opinions. Plus, these media and tools enable research from a distance, which, however imperfect, offers opportunities for free expression and has eroded the sharp distinction of inside versus outside the country, certainly in comparison with 20 years or more ago. Now, media diversity was also the topic of my Gamon colleague Ammar Maliki's presentation in the first day. So if I want to be critical, let's start with ourselves. We at Gamon have tried to make Iranians' voices heard through anonymous surveys because we recognize that simply knocking on people's doors or calling them on their home telephones will frighten many of them and so generate false results that benefit the Islamic Republic. Our surveys conducted in 22 and 23 during the Women Life Freedom protests were conducted with the assistance of media, satellite television channels, VPN tools, in addition to dissemination on social media. And they found, these surveys, that even if there is a great diversity of perspectives, around 80% of Iranians do not want an Islamic Republic. Now, this 80% number is being used currently by various political actors. In the past days, I have read and heard Israeli and American officials use it, including Netanyahu, but it was also just yesterday used on PBS by someone like Nazanin Boniadi, who referred to our work to stress that the sovereignty of Iran must not be confused with the sovereignty of the Islamic Republic. Knowledge production about Iran, especially when it is circulated on various online media, will have very different uses, depending on who is using that knowledge and for what. Is what we do at Gammon then a responsible way of using our academic freedom? It is certainly a question that we can, must, and do ask ourselves. My current view is this. The reality is that we cannot change the political rules of the game of knowledge production. As one Iranian anthropologist, Shore Makaremi Rami, puts it, this is her, she says, as long as access to the field, so that would be in Iran, is what legitimizes and delineates empirical knowledge, even the most impartial research remains dependent on power, particularly the topography of its impunity. We cannot change the political order. We cannot escape surveillance and repression in the field. In short, we cannot change the rules of the political game, but we can transform the rule of the scientific game in order to create conditions which allow for the continuity of knowledge production in context of political violence and silencing. End quote. So, although we cannot control who uses knowledge we produce on Iran, and in what ways, I believe that we can strive at least to use digital opportunities in a way that reveals the truth of Iranian public opinion, even if it is unpleasant. That is what we have done at Gammon and what I tried when I wrote in 2019 that an Iran first mentality is developing, one which is especially popular among monarchists who play a significant ideological role both inside and outside the country. So to be sure, we are not monarchists. I believe that a truly secular state must also be a republic, as monarchies tend to both formally and informally privilege the dominant culture and religion of the past. However, this does not mean that I cannot learn to recognize the views, the pain, and the desires of many monarchists, many of whom genuinely believe in the liberation of Iran and Iran's women. Even if my own late father belonged to an ethnic minority and was imprisoned during the Shah's rule. It is good that many of the presentations in this conference critically analyzed monarchist ideology. For example, putting Mard Mihan Abadi next to Zan Zendegi Azadi is, as some in the conference said, problematic. It changes the meaning of Zan Zendegi Azadi and devalues women's public political power. However, it is also easy to bring together a group of leftists and have them criticize monarchists. Are the left so morally pure, so much on the side of justice, that they deserve no criticism? It would have been far more challenging if the political distribution of this conference had been more diverse. I agree, in other words, with Nagis Mohammadi, who said in a recent interview with Sima Sabet that ما نتوانیم با هم گفتگو کنیم این یک ضعف اساسی است. We have yet to do something about this lack of dialogue. However, being open to diversity and dialogue does not mean that we should extinguish the fire of public political debate. To again paraphrase Habermas, critique and deliberation belong to each other. So let me engage in some more explicit critique. The most problematic presentation in this conference was by Mohammad Reza Farzanegan. Mr. Farzanegan's presentation was problematic both in terms of method and concepts. He referred to the World Value Survey of 2020 conducted in Iran and said that it was done by a British company. This is a half-truth at best. The World Value Survey was conducted by a company called R Research, which has an office in Oxford. Farzanegan refers to Great Britain and the World Value Survey to claim legitimacy for the results. What he did not mention is that our research also used to note its Moscow office on its LinkedIn page. The company actually used to be called Russia Research. That's what the R stands for, Russia. The 2020 survey in Iran was conducted with the assistance of Pars Advanced Research Scholars. This company in Tehran has counted among its clients the Foundation for the Preservation and Publication of Sacred Defense Works and Values, the Ministry of the Interior, and the Office of the Presidency of the Islamic Republic. Facts that can be retrieved from the websites of both our research and Pars Advanced Research if one uses the Wayback Machine to find out what their websites looked like a couple of years ago. It is telling that all this information is now deleted. My point is
So you
not,
mean,
however,
sorry for this
sorry, no, no
interrupting,
problem.
but so you mean if you use the machine, what do you call it, the machine name,
The
boys?
Wayback Machine,
The
it
Wayback
allows you
Machine, which
to it allows you to look at what websites looked like a couple of years ago because it
years
has
ago.
stored
So
them.
if you use that on the same website of our research, you will figure out that the name was actually Russia Research, and also the
Yes, yes.
company is not a
And all
UK.
the people who work for it have Russian names, by the way, also. So it's not
Yeah, please
still today.
continue.
Yeah, so but my point is not actually that the data are manipulated. That would be actually too easy. My point is that Mr. Farzanagan has an agenda that benefits the Islamic Republic. The surveys that he refers to were conducted either through interviews at people's homes in Iran or by calling them on their home telephones. And by the way, many people don't even use home telephones, but that's another issue. The regime knows that these surveys will produce regime-friendly results as a consequence of many people's fear to express themselves honestly. So Faisal Nagan, for example, did not say in his presentation that according to the World Value Survey, which he believes is an objective, reliable, and valid source, almost 100% of Iranians identify as Muslims, and that around 80% believe a theocracy is a good political system, or a religion-based political system is very good. But the problem is not just methodical. It goes further than that into the realm of concepts. Mr. Farzaneh in his presentation repeatedly spoke about civil disorder and even about terrorism, implying a connection between those who oppose the regime and violence, but leaving it vague enough so that he can claim objectivity. Now, I've read his work. He did this much more explicitly in a recent report co-authored with Sven Fischer on life satisfaction during and after the Women Life Freedom protests. Farzanagan repeatedly in this text refers to the violent protests and violent protesters when he's, writing about the Women Life Freedom protests. In the conclusion, he and his co-author write, and I quote, "To achieve the reduction of violent protests, there needs to be a legal framework that allows for peaceful protests and persecutes violent protesters. This will prevent inciting violence from those protesting." And let me just read that to you one more time, right? To achieve the reduction of violent protests, there needs to be a legal framework that allows for peaceful protests and persecutes violent protesters. This will prevent inciting violence from those protesting. End quote. Mr. Farzanagan also writes about the violence of both sides, the Islamic Republic and the protesters, in an effort to be supposedly objective. Now, I have seen many apologetic publications in my life, but never did I encounter a publication by a professor based in Germany who openly called for the persecution of Iranian protesters, and that in a text about the Women Life Freedom protests. So, what do we do with this deception? The current wars are shaped by media and by scientific knowledge production. It will not be easy at all, also not for us. I don't think that we are pure and perfect to navigate this complex territory. It's not easy. Our best option, therefore, remains to include multiple perspectives, to examine our positions, and to expose ourselves, also emotionally, to those who think differently, and to use multiple theories and methods. Now, this doesn't mean agreeing with the likes of Mr. Farzaneh. What it could mean is that we spend significant time processing each other's work, and I am unfortunately I also that meant I had to read his work, but especially the solid work of those who may not be as well known as others, but who really make a contribution. I've heard several of these today, and also in the past 2 days. I heard, for example, in the presentations on the difficulties journalists face in Iran, with also data gathered on that. So it's really important that we read about that. I heard about Afghan women's rights, on the importance of the stories of political prisoners, and in the exchanges about how to form political judgments and how to do that while also imagining that people might form other political judgments. So it's very difficult, and I wish you all the best, everybody who participated and listened in these trying times. And thank
Thank
you,
you.
Sajad, for giving me this
N-
opportunity.
Oh, it was a pleasure, and thank you so much for accepting on such short notice to come and share your point of views. And thank you for your critique. I really appreciate it. That said, I think it's important also to situate this conference in the broader history of such events. And in that sense, I would say this conference, for me, in many ways, I would argue this was one of the most diverse ones so far that we could put together. And we are like we have seen in recent years a lot of events like that in terms of perspectives and diversity of perspectives and participation. So and also thank you so much for clarifying the context around Mr. Farzanagan's research. And what struck me when I was hearing the presentation, uh, and continue to concerns me, is how easily social sciences can be co-opted to serve authoritarian narratives. And we have seen it a lot in publications, especially in Persian language, in open access. And I've been discussing this with one of the managers in the OAJ, the Directory of Open Access Journals, about more than 900, I think over 900 journals are being published in Persian from Iran and from inside Iran, and they are like full of this kind of studies, I would say. And we've seen this before. We are seeing it now, and it's an engine that produces all kinds of knowledge. Terms like, I mean, in this particular presentation, terms like terrorism, social disorder, civil war are not just descriptive, they are deeply political tools. And it's now with these pieces of information that you provided, when we put things together, you see the machinery that can produce very particular narrative, but in a scientific language, uh, and with particular methodology, and of course people don't go through this kind of survey analysis and to know what's behind that. And
Yeah,
I
if I may I say one
yeah, yeah.
comment?
We don't have very much time,
Right.
but
I
like
think
2 3 minutes we have, yeah, left.
right, sure. So I think what can really help to calm down the emotions, I was now a bit critical, but to calm down is to read the literature, for example, on the Women Life Freedom protests in a really broad way in multiple languages.
Hmm.
And we all complain that, why did this author do this, or why did that author exclude or include that?
Hmm.
But if you read much of the literature, you'll find that a lot of it is actually there. So for today, I heard, for example, somebody mention Homa Darabi,
Hmm.
right? So she is not mentioned in most of the woman life freedom literature, but some authors do it. For example, a book by Farhad Khosrow Khavar, he mentions it, right?
Hmm.
So if you read only one of these, you might get angry. But if you read many of these publications, I think it is good for your heart rate
Yeah,
and
so you're absolutely right. And what I wanted to get to, it was, I believe that these voices should be heard, because it should be presented in a way that, so we can discuss about it, we can talk about it, we can criticize it, and we can, let's say, reveal some facts or evidences about them, so it can be actually known to people in the field, or people or general public who are exposed to that kind of knowledge production. So many of us have been calling out the problematic nature of this kind of knowledge production in the social sciences, especially when it comes to the state of exception. And yeah, it's really important to discuss this. And thank you very much for accepting my invitation to come online in the third day of the conference, because I really was eager to keep it within the context of the conference, so we could talk properly about things that may struck us and make us emotional and then angry, but we don't properly discuss it, and it's not properly discussed. Thank you very much, Puyan, and
you're
once
welcome.
again. And I hope yeah, you will free your daughter's room so she can play. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Have a great day.